Today's our guest is Andrew Brewer from Irongall Apartments. Welcome, Andrew. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing well. How about you?
Yeah, doing well. Thank you very much. A little bit about Andrew. Andrew is a commercial operator and developer who brings years of experience in many facets of real estate to Irongall Investments. Prior to starting Irongall Investments, Andrew had a successful career as a stationary engineer. As an engineer, Andrew oversaw operations in high-rise commercial facilities valued individually at over 200 million. He successfully completed full building turnarounds of underperforming commercial assets, leading to improved operations, lower maintenance costs, and improved resident experiences. In addition to his engineering work, Andrew has acted as a consultant in construction defect litigation lawsuits. He has assisted prosecutors in pursuing judgments in excess of 60 millions and overseen commercial reconstruction projects valued individually at over 12 millions. So with that, Andrew, you want to add anything to your background?
No, that pretty much covers it.
How did you get into real estate space, Andrew?
Yeah, so working as a stationary engineer, I was working in, these large commercial facilities, high-rise buildings. So, there's essentially that was, doing operations engineering and also asset management for large facilities. So I had some hands-on experience just because of my W-2 job. So that's one of the ways I got started. My wife also, she kind of pushed me to look at different types of investing and, different assets to invest into. And so since I was already working in real estate, I started, looking at real estate as well. So while I was working, I was also investing in properties of my own, single family, small multifamilies, out of state. And after, several years at my last job, I kind of reached a natural ending point there. We had some projects that we were working on at the facility and those kind of wrapped up. And so it was a good, kind of natural separation point for me. So I quit that job and, went out and started developing my own projects. So kind of went from managing other people's developments and projects to managing my own. And because I had already invested myself in some other projects, even though they were smaller ones, I understood, lending, underwriting, investor returns, what made a good deal, what didn't make a good deal. And so because of that, I was able to combine that with my hands-on experience in my job. And that's what led me to found my company and start doing my own projects. So that was kind of my journey into real estate.
Got it. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And you have good experience in asset management as well. Before jumping into your current focus like land development, those kind of stuff. Let me understand some lessons learned from asset management. What are some best practices?
Open communication with all of your team members is really the best thing. That can't be overstated enough. It's very important to have that regular and open communication with everybody that is responsible for your facility, whether that's your plumbing teams or your grounds maintenance teams or your handyman, your on-site persons, communicating with the property manager, the residents there. It's good to just have that open dialogue. Having regular communications with everyone too is another important thing, because when you have regular communication, weekly meetings, bi-weekly meetings, even daily meetings, sometimes you can catch issues before they really become a problem. We live in the real world of something like a building. Things are going to break, things are going to go wrong. You're going to have problems that need to be solved. That's just part of the game. It's never going to be completely smooth. But the worst thing that you can do is to ignore things. And because if you ignore things or you ignore issues that come up or you try to put them off, it just gets worse over time. They just become bigger problems. So trying to jump on problems before they become bigger issues is really a great way to to mitigate costs, to mitigate damages. When you're doing asset management, you are responsible for keeping collections high. You're responsible for keeping expenses in check, and especially when you're dealing with investor money, you don't want to take some problem that maybe it costs you $1,000 to fix it right away. If you just leave it alone and ignore it and don't deal with it, the next thing you know, now it's $10,000 to fix it. And that's not your money. That's investors' money that you're dealing with. So as an asset manager, you have a responsibility to safeguard that and to, find the most cost-effective solutions. So, I just think really staying on top of stuff, regular communication, identifying problems early, and then taking care of those problems early. And that's, in my opinion, the key to success in asset management.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that experience. So there are multiple ways we can invest in apartments, like value add deals, class A, class B, class C, all this stuff. So, but you choose like land development side, right? Ground up development. So what is the reason behind it?
I enjoy the creative aspect of land development. I mean, nothing against people that do value add, but there's not as much creativity in buying an existing asset. You're kind of working with something that's already there. Land development and building new construction, you can create something from scratch. I find it very fulfilling to take a piece of land, which to me, is like a blank canvas, and, build something completely new there. So I very much enjoy that. The other thing is, we really have a supply shortage here in the United States right now. Many areas. I'm based in Austin, Texas. I focus on Austin, San Antonio. I'm originally from the Bay Area in California. I lived in LA for some time. I lived in Denver. All of those places have a lack of supply. There's a lot of people moving to those areas. There's not enough housing units for everyone. It drives the cost of housing, the cost of everything up really high, which, I mean, hey, it's great for us as developers and people in real estate. Our assets are worth more. But, it's also hard to see that people can't have a hard time affording rent, have a hard time affording, to buy a home. So, I like to bring new products onto the market, new townhomes, houses, apartments, just any kind of residential unit to try to help alleviate some of that supply crisis that we have. I get a lot of fulfillment from trying to help solve that problem in what little way I can. I can't solve that problem myself, but, hopefully I can add some more to the supply and, help some people find housing.
Got it. Yeah, thank you. So you mentioned you can fulfill creative side of yourself in ground
Yeah.
up development. Would you share me a few other examples how exactly you implemented some creative ideas?
In development, we can design, our buildings and our communities from scratch. There's more to it than just, designing a building. Obviously we design a building and that can be very fulfilling. You can have different architecture styles or even just different design styles, different types of exterior cladding or roof styles or interior design. All of those things can be very neat. Designing new types of, I guess I'll say, interiors. We design efficiency units and things like that are pretty interesting to see how we can make a floor plan look a little bit bigger, how we can maybe add additional bedrooms or study nooks or whatever. So it's interesting working architecturally there, but also we can somewhat design the layout of the community. Obviously that depends very heavily on, the city and the county regulations, road widths and fire access lanes and detention ponds and all those kinds of things. But we can design, certain amenities. We can design the site plan and the layout. We can have areas that have, more trees. We can preserve older heritage trees. We can add a lot of stuff onto the site plan as well that makes a community very, very appealing. A lot of people don't necessarily want to live in a community that, it's just like concrete. There's no grass, there's no trees, there's nothing. It's just like units and they're gray. And being able to add some color, to add more amenities, walking trails, it can make a community much more enjoyable to live in and much more enjoyable to look at than just, kind of having a basic grid design that lacks any kind of character. So I enjoy that. There's a balance there between obviously having to get a certain amount of density, like a certain number of units per acre or something, so that we can hit our underwriting metrics and provide our investors a good return. But balancing all of those factors, it's like solving a great big jigsaw puzzle, really. We have to sit there and say, hey, I've got all of these pieces and I have to make them fit together so that it forms a complete picture. And we just have a lot of brainstorming, a lot of back and forth, like, hey, maybe I'll put this piece over here, I'll put that piece over here, I'll shift this around, I'll move this building here, I'll move this amenity there, I'll make the road in this way. I really enjoy all of that. And there's a lot of different things that you can incorporate into a community that just make it look really cool. I think a lot of people have gone by a building or a neighborhood where they look at it and they say like, wow, this is a beautiful neighborhood. I would love to live here. Oh, that's a beautiful building. It's got, great architecture, these great features. And I just think it's so cool that I can have a hand in designing those kinds of things. Somebody could walk by a community that, I've designed and built and think like, wow, that's a beautiful community. I would like to live there. I'd like to, raise my kids there. And that's very rewarding to think that people could think that. I hope people go by my communities and say that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing so many creative ideas. So what's your investment criteria or purchasing criteria for this land development, opportunities? How do you see like location wise, demographic wise, and theme wise?
Location wise, I mean, it really depends on the type of product that we are doing. So if we're doing, something like multifamily or townhomes where it's higher density, it's going to be people that want to be very close to their jobs, within a reasonable commute distance. Then we're looking for something that is probably within about 30 minutes of a major job center. We would be looking for, land that has city utilities, water, sewer, electric, so that we can achieve that higher density. There's just certain aspects about the land that we have to look at, what kind of, soil is on the land. Like obviously if it's like rock or limestone, that's very challenging to work with. Our site work contractors have a difficult time working through limestone. They have to go in and blast things out to lay utility lines. It can be very expensive. So we look for that. We look for access. If you have a high density project, you need multiple points of access onto the property so that in the event of some kind of emergency, like a fire, you could get emergency vehicles onto the property and that people can get out of the property. So access is very important. So we start by looking at characteristics of the land like that. Anyone that's looked at land before has probably seen instances where, you have some piece of land that, is selling for a certain price. And then, maybe just like a mile down the road, there's another piece of land that's selling for 5 or 10 times as much. And you wonder like, why is this piece of land so much more expensive, or why is this piece of land so much cheaper? And it could have to do with all of those factors. It could have to do with, maybe there's an endangered species, or there's environmental contaminants, maybe there's a problem with access, maybe one of the pieces of land doesn't have, utilities on it, maybe there's, a different zoning, or one land has the ability to be rezoned, but another piece doesn't. There's all these kinds of factors that you have to look at that really make the price of land vary so wildly. So we start, kind of by looking at that. As far as demographics, we look primarily to income, again, depending on what we're building. Again, if something like townhomes or apartments, we'll look for a middle class, upper middle class level of income, which can vary based on the area, right? So, we'll look for that. Now, if we're doing something that's, like single family or, estate lots or something like that, we don't necessarily need to be next to a major job center. Sometimes it makes sense, but sometimes there's a lot of people that, they don't want to be near a major job center. They actually want to be farther away. They want some more privacy. They don't want, neighbors right next to them. Maybe they're retired. Maybe they have the ability to work remotely. Clients like that are going to have a very different set of criteria that they're looking at. So, it just depends on, who the end buyer is. I don't personally build single family homes, but I do develop, paper lots for single family home development companies like D.R. Horton and Lennar. I'll talk to them and their land buyers about, what areas they're looking in. And then I target those areas because I know like these are the people that are going to buy my project when it's done. So I want to make sure that I'm going to the markets that they want to be in. I'll ask them about what their criteria is, what size lots do they want? What are they looking for as far as community amenities? What towns do they want to be in? Do they want to be in the middle of town? Do they want to be on the outskirts? So I'll base my development criteria around what they are looking for in their projects. And I'll find that information either through directly talking to those companies and their land buyers, or through brokers that I work with who also have connections, and kind of come to, maybe an average of what they're looking for. Generally, it'll be, lots within a certain size. There'll be, some base level of requirements. There'll be certain target markets. And then I look to those markets and see if I can find land in those areas. That's how I target land. It really depends on the product type, right? There's going to be different buyers for different product types. And there's going to be just a different class of clientele that are looking for different things. So just knowing that is very important. And then you tailor it to the client, same way as, any kind of market, right? You need to develop a product that somebody else is going to want to buy. Like you can develop the coolest thing in the whole world, but if it's not of value to anyone else, or there's not enough people that it's of value to, you're probably not going to be very successful because your pool of buyers or clients is very limited.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. In the current market, what are some of the greatest opportunities and some challenges you are seeing in land development space?
Opportunities right now, there are, a lot. There's people aren't buying land like they were a couple years ago. A couple years ago, the market for land, at least here in Austin, San Antonio, was really, really hot. People would just, come in and offer way, way over asking price. They would just pay cash. It was hard to, to find a deal that made sense. And even if you did, it was hard to get that, piece of land locked up because, somebody would just come in and outbid you. So that's kind of gone away. We don't see that same kind of frenzy to just buy any piece of land, no matter what it is. But that's also one of the challenges, right? Because, the sellers, they don't really want to drop their price. They still want to get that same price that they were seeing, a couple years ago. And I've talked to so many sellers over the last, year, 18 months who've said something along the lines of, yeah, I want to sell my land. I was like getting it ready to sell. And then I like put it on the market, but now nobody's offering me anything. Or, they're not offering me what, the price that I want or what I think it's worth. I just have to tell them like, well, the market's changed. Like the lending environment has really changed. It's much more difficult to get land loans and development loans right now. So, you can't walk into a bank and get a land loan at 75 or 80% leverage with a really low interest rate like you used to be able to. So people are having to decide what to do with their capital. And, a lot of the time, if it's a choice between, just putting that capital in a piece of land that's going to sit there that will appreciate, but maybe isn't going to produce, any income right away, versus putting that money into, like a multifamily deal or, something like that, that is going to give them cash flow right away, they might choose that. That's kind of the challenge. And as developers, we're kind of stuck between a lending market and, an overall market that's kind of shrunk, but then sellers that don't want to reduce their price at all. They just say like, well, this is the price that, it was, and that's what I want, and I'm not going to budge off of that. So it just requires us to get a little more creative, so sometime we'll try to buy an option from the seller, something like, hey, I'm going to try to develop, but over the next couple of years, I'll pay you, whatever it is, $30,000, $50,000 as an option to buy. That way, I don't have to put down so much cash up front in order to get the rights to develop the land, or, trying to get the seller to partner with you in some way. Like if you can tell them like, hey, why don't you contribute the value of your land as equity to a partnership with me, and I'll do the work to develop it. And then at the end of the day, I can actually pay you this price that you want. I can't justify the price right now, but if you give me some time to develop it and add some value, then I can pay you that price. So just kind of getting creative with financing and deal structure, is kind of the key right now. And I know that's true across many, many asset classes right now. People are having to get very creative to get around, high interest rates, high seller expectations, and keep doing deals. Yeah, I think that's kind of the benefit. There's less competition. The downside is there's less people willing to make a deal and sell for a reasonable price.
Yeah, and also you touch a very good point. From lending point of view, there are some challenges, right? So
Yes,
yeah.
definitely.
So would you share some creative idea you have implemented as part of land development or any real estate?
Things that I've done that have implemented more value. Probably the biggest thing has been value engineering certain projects. So the fact that we have so many different suppliers out there and so many companies that produce, for the most part, the same product, we value engineer products, especially our architectural plans. We can really save a lot of money. We found, when you're talking about basic products, windows, sheetrock, tiles, countertops, cabinets, things like that, really diving in and trying to find the best suppliers for those can save so much money on the back end, right? You're talking about, say, like just a basic white subway tile that you would put in a bathroom. I mean, you can find something that looks exactly the same that costs you, $2 a tile, and then you can find the exact, it looks the same. It's obviously different manufacturer, but it looks exactly the same. Nobody's going to be able to tell the difference for like 50 cents or 25 cents a tile. And all of those little things can add up. So whenever we're having projects bid out, we make sure that we're value engineering those products to make sure that we're buying materials at the best price. Often, because we're doing large projects, we can order in bulk and get like a good bulk discount, but really just honing in on different suppliers. Like, don't get lazy with your general contractor. Just like give them the plans, they give you a bid, you just take the bid. You want to find a GC that's willing to go to a bunch of different suppliers to get you the best price on everything, not just like beating up one supplier to get his price down, but going to different ones and saying, I need this product. It's very generic. So there are probably 50 companies out there that make the exact same thing, and going to each of them and saying, who is actually going to give me the best price for this? Who can actually guarantee delivery timelines? All of those, little things add up. You're counting pennies kind of, but, if you count enough pennies, that can add up to hundreds of dollars, right? Or, on a project like this, it's more than hundreds of dollars. But, it's the little bit here. You save $1 per fixture over here. You save $2 per fixture over there. You save $30 off of each cabinet. You save, a few cents per square foot on flooring or whatever it is. Over time, all of that adds up. If you figure you've got a unit with a kitchen and 2 bathrooms, well, you've got 3-4 faucets in there. But if you have 330 units in your community, well, okay, that's 4 times 330, and if you're saving a few dollars on each of those, $5, $10 a faucet, well, that's adding up to thousands upon thousands of dollars. And if you do that on every single thing in your unit, you save so much money. I just see people that, they get very lazy with their GC. They just kind of take their word at it, and they don't know if their GC has really gone out and tried to find the best product at the cheapest price. So that's the number one thing that I do to really add like a little bit of extra value in everything.
Yeah, awesome stuff. So where do you get your supply materials? Is local, you import from, other countries?
It's a mix. So some stuff we'll import directly from suppliers in China or Mexico, or try to go directly to the factory. On some stuff, we will deal with local suppliers. I mean, obviously stuff here in the US is expensive if you go through a local supplier, but sometimes we're able to find better variety of things by going to a local supplier. So we do just end up getting a mix. Sometimes we'll get very generic stuff from overseas, but, we'll get, I guess, more custom or thematic. Like, if there's something that is required to give a unit a specific look or a specific design feel, we'll need to go to a more local supplier to find some of those specific items, because sale price or our rental price is based on having that certain type of style, right? So we really need the product that's going to give that specific feel to the unit. Sometimes you can't find that overseas, or it's not as easy to find overseas. It requires you to go to like a really, really niche, company, and then there can be, logistical challenges from shipping, from overseas. You have to think about the risk in it, right? Like if you're just shipping like sheetrock or tiles or cabinets or something like that, there's a lot of companies overseas that can do that. They're big companies, you don't have to worry so much. If it's a smaller, company, maybe somebody that's manufacturing cabinet door hardware or, something like that, where you need a specific style, it's, a smaller shipment. then it makes more sense to deal with a local supplier because they'll take on the responsibility of getting it over here and delivering it to you. So if I think it's going to take more time and more hassle and is going to cost, probably just as much money or close to it to try to order it myself, I'll just go to a local supplier and say, you take the responsibility for this because I have to think about monetary value of time. If I can't spend all of my time managing one or two shipments, right? So if I can, throw that to a middleman and it doesn't, really affect my budget that much, then I'll go that way.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Yeah, great stuff. And would you also share any challenging experiences so far?
Yeah, challenging experiences. Really what I've learned in development is that your biggest risk in any development project is going to be other people, so whether that's, your neighbors or people on the city, city council, planning and zoning commission, those are the people that can really kind of mess your project up. You have a good architect, you have a good engineering team, and they'll be able to design the product to conform to city codes and city regulations, but if people at the city don't like you, or that one guy on city council that has a beef about something, that can really derail your project. And I have a couple projects where we've hit some challenges like that. I try to be very careful during due diligence to go and speak with the city and make sure that project that I want to do is something that they want to see. I don't really want to go fight with the city and spend years and years and legal bills and everything trying to get a project done. I want to have a good relationship with the city. If they don't want me to develop land or they don't want a certain type of asset, I just say, okay, that's fine. I'll go find another project somewhere else. But, even with all of that due diligence, you're not necessarily able to talk to every single person at the city that's going to be looking at your project, every single engineer, every single reviewer, every member of city council. You can't realistically speak to everyone during your due diligence period. So, I've had a couple instances where the city manager, the city planner, whoever it was, said something along the lines of, yes, we're very excited to have your project here. We're happy to work with you. This is exactly what we want. Then we get into the review process and there will be one person. I have one project where it's the city engineer. I have another project where it's she works at the planning and zoning office, right? And she kind of manages all the submissions, and that one person can kind of mess you up a little bit. So I've seen some delays there. What I do to mitigate that is I just add a lot of extra time onto my timeline. I have an internal timeline that I create before I even close the project. And, I do my best to adhere to that, but there's always going to be something that pops up. There's always going to be some kind of problem, some kind of delay. Your project's never going to go as smoothly as it looks in the underwriting up front. So I always make sure to add a lot of additional time because I can't necessarily foresee where the problems are going to come from or what they're going to be, but I know that they're going to come. So I want to make sure that I have extra time so that I can, handle that. And, and I underwrite the deal and the returns and everything on that kind of extended bloated timeline. And at the end of the day, if everything goes perfectly, well, great. I got the project done in half the time that I told the investors. If not, I don't have to sweat it if the timeline slips, 2-3 weeks or, 6 weeks or whatever it is, which happens sometimes, no matter what you do, sometimes timeline slips. And I think that just as long as you're, upfront about that with your investors, as long as you have appropriate time contingency and budget contingency, the project will be okay. Really, I only see people getting into issues when they haven't budgeted for enough time and enough money in their contingency to account for, the challenges that they have there. Be careful with the city. Sometimes they say they're going to be fine to work with, and there's that one guy that decides to cause a problem for you, and you have to figure out how to get around that. That's just part of the game.
Yeah, got it. So what's your goals or plans for next 2 to 5 years?
The next 2 to 5 years, I've got about 8 development projects rolling right now. So, continue to work on those and get those figured out. I'm being more selective with the deals that I'm taking on now. I mean, I was always very selective. I was never just doing deals, willy-nilly, but just with the change in the lending environments and the uncertainty in the economy, I want to be extra careful that, I'm not walking into a bad deal. So being a little bit more cautious, and also, paying close attention to the areas that I'm developing. We've seen some parts of Texas that have really overdeveloped in certain asset classes, and there's going to be a dip in some of those asset classes. Office space in downtown Austin is one good example. They've developed a lot of office space, but now as people don't want to go back to working in the office and everyone wants to work remote, you've got some vacant buildings down there. That's a challenge for those developers. There's been a lot of apartments that have been built up in North Austin. There's probably more supply than there is demand in that submarket. So just I'm paying very close attention to submarkets to make sure that the submarkets aren't overdeveloped. But I'll continue with the projects that I'm doing and similar types of projects, look for those, make sure the numbers make sense, and, just kind of keep on as I'm doing it. I think I've developed a pretty good business model and, and way of working, way of evaluating projects and selecting projects. And, it's worked out well. And, I underwrite very conservatively. So, I'll keep looking for those projects. I'm not looking to just do every deal that I can get my hands on. I want to do good quality deals. One thing that I've learned over the last few years is there are certain types of deals that I want to do and certain types of deals that I don't want to do, whether that's, specific to the type of project or the type of team it is or the responsibility split. I'm just very selective at this point. Have had great partnerships with some people and not so great partnerships with some people. And, I want to focus on doing projects that I enjoy. And I don't want to just do a deal for the sake of doing a deal. I know that a lot of people kind of start out that way. They just want to get they just want a deal, any deal. It doesn't really matter. Several years ago when I was just starting, I was a little more like that. I'm not like that anymore. I kind of learned sometimes it's not worth the hassle to do a deal that's going to be super stressful. So just doing the types of projects I'm doing and being very selective about the projects I take on and the people that I work with.
Great stuff. So any books that impacted your life?
Never Split the Difference is a great book that I enjoy. Talks a good amount about contract negotiation and just learning to listen to people, communicate with people in a different way. I enjoy that one. I was a history and anthropology major in college. So, I always enjoy reading historical books, biographies or, books about certain periods of time, rise and fall of empires and kind of what led to, strengths that led to great empires, factors that led to their demise. I've been reading recently about, the Byzantine Empire and how that kind of grew. There's a book, it's by Ostrogorsky, but he goes into the history of the Byzantine Empire, how that kind of rose out of the Roman Empire, but then also, was weakened and, was taken over by the Ottoman Empire. And so it's fascinating. That was an empire that lasted for about 1,000 years, actually. So when I think about the current state of geopolitics in the larger world, things have kind of been a certain way for a long time. Maybe that's shifting, maybe it's not. I'm sure we'll be able to look back in a couple hundred years and pick things up, but in the moment it's difficult to say. But nothing's permanent.
Which biography inspired you most?
I think it's called 42, but it was actually Jackie Robinson's biography. So I attended UCLA for my undergrad, and Jackie Robinson also was a UCLA undergraduate. And he had a very interesting life, a very interesting story. He overcame a lot of hassles, segregation and racism and, all that kind of stuff. But he persevered through it all and, kind of came out on top. And that was very inspiring to read what he went through and how he kept his focus and, he kind of stayed on his path that he knew he needed to be on and was very successful in spite of certain barriers, that were put in place, certain things that he was told. And, I think that's the recipe for success, right? You have to be willing to persevere even when people around you are telling you that you can't, even if there are, certain barriers in place or, what you're trying to do hasn't been done before. If you've got a good idea and you have confidence, go with it. That's also what I've done. I didn't come from an investing family. People in my family and friend group thought I was crazy for trying to do what I'm doing. But, I had to know that what I was doing was the right thing for me. And it's worked out so far, for me. So
Yeah, awesome. And how can listeners can connect with you, Andrew?
Folks can go to my website. I have two. It's irongallinvestments.com, or they can go to my other company, distance3development.com. You can also look me up on Facebook and LinkedIn, Andrew Brewer, and I'm always willing to connect and talk to people. And, I like networking. I like connecting with new people, good people that are, driven and looking to do more in life. It's always great to have those kinds of conversations. So anyone feel free to reach out.
Awesome. And thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you for sharing your expertise on land developments and some best and challenging experiences. Thank you very much.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for having me.
Sure.